Okay, so back to the more detailed model. Let's take a look at the fireplace. The reason we stopped and switched gears to discuss how to cut into difficult shapes is because that is one of the best ways to handle without having to delete and remake this base. Intersect selected is how we're going to be able to carve this base away to get our new fireplace in place. I've uploaded the image of this fireplace if you want to follow along. If you don't want to bring something that looks like this in, no problem. If you want to just go find another, a different component somewhere, or if you want to find another image that you like, I used an image and I'm going to demonstrate how I used that image to make this. So let's take a look at how to do that in our kind of cleaner white foam core model. Go back to, let's look at scene 2, because I think scene 2 is where we can really get a good view of this fireplace. I also like that what we've done, this is just a quick side note, what we've done with expanding our camera field of view actually makes it a lot easier to work inside the model, because if the wider the field of view, the easier it is to move around. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. Okay, so what am I doing here? I'm looking at replacing this fireplace. So I want the hearth to be exactly the same. So I'm just going to make a rectangle, plop, and make this into a group, and just place it in place. Then I'm going to delete the whole fireplace. So that fireplace is now gone. Now I can expand my hearth to move it back a little bit and move it back into place. So I'm just going to push it back here. So this base needs to be cut here and here, and let's do that before we do anything else. So to do that, I'm going to use my new hearth as a reference point. I'm just going to draw a rectangle from that corner to that corner. Then I'm going to hide that hearth. Now I'm going to group this and expand it a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. So I'm just going to bring it up along the blue axis, and then select the whole thing and move it down along the blue axis. Then I'm going to push-pull it out a little bit, orbit around to the other side, push-pull it back this way through that base. Okay, so I want to cut the base here, and I want to cut the base here. Select this dummy box, select that base, lock everything, lock those two things, hide everything else, then unlock it. Okay, you can see how useful that is, because the more detail we get in the model, the harder it is to start doing some of these crazier things like cutting into this shape. Okay, now I want to explode. I think we've grouped all of the base together, so I'm gonna ungroup that by exploding that. Then I'm going to select the two pieces that I want to fuse together, and I'm going to select them both, and I'm going to explode them. Then I'm going to select the whole thing again. I'm going to get nice and close because I want to see this happen as I do it. I'm going to right click, intersect faces with selection, click. Now it's given me that plane through this. It's actually cut it at that point because I've intersected it. Let's look at the other side. Same thing, exactly what I wanted. So I can select, I'm just going to delete this so you can see what's going on the inside. I'm going to select all of this stuff. Now I've selected the top face, the bottom face of this dummy box, the back face, and all of that middle chunk of base that I don't want anymore, and I can delete it. Now I can select the face that kind of surrounds the edge of that base and delete it, and go ahead and delete these lines. Zoom out a little bit. I'm going to group this guy. Then I'm going to delete this face and these lines because that's not necessary anymore, and I can group this now. Group. Now I'm going to just zoom out, regroup my base all as one element. So I'm going to select the whole thing and group it, and then unhide all. Edit unhide all. Go back to my scene 2. Okay, great. So now what that's done is it's cut a hole. It's cut actually right down the middle of that base, which is exactly what I wanted it to do. Okay, now next step, make a new fireplace. So just arbitrarily, I'm gonna click out from this point, and I'm gonna make my fireplace 6 feet wide. And I'll worry about how tall it is based on how big that material is. I'm just gonna make a rectangle here. I'm gonna go way higher than I probably need to. And I'm gonna group this open it up and push pull it out. Let's push pull it out 8 inches. Okay, so that's how far my new fireplace is going to stick out onto this space. And we might edit this down the road, we'll see. Then I'll center this up. So I'll start from my midpoint and I'll just drag it along this red axis, and I'm just going to touch the midpoint of the hearth below. Okay, so now it's centered. Don't need my guides anymore, so edit, delete those. Now let's pull up the material with my bucket, and I'm going to navigate to find a new material, new texture. And I'm going to go right to where I've saved this stuff. So in my folder for this project, I've started saving a furniture and finishes folder. So let me navigate to my fireplace. There's my fireplace. So this is the fireplace I'm bringing in. And the reason I bring in a texture like this, let's say this is the actual fireplace that my client is going to be installing, or this is what I'm recommending for them. There is no way on earth I'm going to model all of this stuff, and it's going to look way better if I just bring in a photo of it and then use this as a guide than it is if I built this from scratch. And who has that kind of time? So I always like to use photo references whenever I can, but I also try to save them down, because if I bring this in as a huge 5 megabyte file, that's all that file size is going to get absorbed into the model. So this is pretty low. So I'm going to open this up. The width, let's just make it 6 feet, but we do have some white space, so we'll probably have to do a little editing. So I'm just going to say width 6 feet, okay. I don't want to paste it to the whole box. I want to open the box up. So I'm double clicking and I'm going to select that face. And I'm going to, with my texture, with my bucket tool, I select this. I'm going to click it right on that face. Now I need to scale this up so that it fits from this edge to that edge. So I'm going to right click and go to my texture position. Here's where I get to start using some of these different little pins on the side. The green one is the scale. So if you just move it around using any point on the face, texture, position, any point on the face of the inside of this texture as you move it around, that's the easiest thing you can do. You can also stretch using the blue. I basically only use the stretch and the scale, because this guy, the warp, not really that helpful, and this is basically just move, which you can do pretty much anywhere on the material. So I put this in place here, and I'm just going to start using my green, and I have to hold down on my left click as I'm doing this and drag it along, and you'll notice I can also rotate it. I don't want to rotate it right now. I just want to drag it like this. So I'm just kind of making small adjustments. Okay, and when I'm done, I right click and I say done. When you open up and edit a material, let me do that again, texture position. The one thing that's interesting about this is once you're inside this window, it's not like you can undo each step you've made. So if I don't like this, but I do like what I just did, I can't do Apple Z because it's actually going to take it all the way back. Okay, so let me undo that. I'm going to go ahead and size this up again. The whole point of that was basically just to let you know that you're not going to be able to control each little movement you can't like catalog each movement, and the history state won't remember it. Okay, so I've got this in place, just about where I want it. Move it into place there. Click and say done. All right, now I'm just going to push pull the top of this up until I hit the top of that crown. It was already pretty close. Happy accident. Then I'm going to make a rectangle here. From this point, I'm using now just the material behind as my guide. So I can push-pull this away. I'll probably push-pull this back a little bit because I don't think it comes out that far. Let me bring it back maybe 3 inches. And then I'm going to right-click and I'm going to make this texture projected. I want this texture to project on anything else I make, and that'll make a little bit more sense in a second. Okay, we've got a few little parts here that are three-dimensional. I'm not going to go super nuts on this, but I do want to bring this face out. So I'm going to move in, and I'm going to draw a line. I'm ignoring the crown because I'm going to add the crown separate, or the mantle. So I'm just going to do a line from there to there. And I'm going to push-pull this face out just a little bit so that it's got some relief. I'm going to do the same thing here. And you can see this is why it's another good example of why it's a good thing to have these axes guides up as you're drawing, because you can just use them to line up with what you're looking at. So I'm drawing a straight line all the way down. Do the same thing on this side. Again, all the way down here. And now I'm just going to push-pull these to match that. Okay, the last thing I want to do is I want to add this crown piece here. So I'm going to start with a new shape. I'm going to make this a group. Let's hide this back wall so this is a little easier to see. I'm going to sample from this face, this material, because this is a projected texture. So if I click here, it'll actually line right up where I want it to. So I can now draw a new shape, starting with my arc tool. Oops. Let's go to my 2-point arc, and I'm just tracing the existing shape. I'm not going to go too nuts. I'm just going to give this like an overall shape like that. Okay, so I'll go ahead and select everything I don't need and delete it. Then I'll give myself a path. So I'll follow this line. Let me zoom back in. Just panning over. Okay, so I'm just using my line tool to follow the whole top line of this. I'm not going to connect it all the way to the other side, so when I'm done I just hit escape. Close this down. Select that path by double clicking on it and move it up. Okay, now, whoops, now I can explode this and then select that path and do a follow me. So there's my mantle. Triple click on that and make it a group. Select this and delete it. But because I've made the texture behind projected, I can now project the texture of this fireplace onto this 3D mantle. So I can open this mantle up, select the whole thing, open up my bucket tool. Instead of clicking straight on this, I actually want to sample from this material because this is the projected texture. Click right onto that. Now it's actually projecting that texture onto the mantle. Now what I would do is I would just make these two things into one group. I would unhide that wall, and then I might push-pull this in just a little bit because maybe we want like a little bit of brick on the inside of this, and that's something that we can handle separately with our material. And lastly, I would open this base up, double-click on that. I know this may not be the proper way to do it, but just for the sake of cleaning this line up, I would draw a line along that face and just carve that and bring that forward over that hearth a little bit. Do the same thing over here. Select that face, click, okay, and then drag that face to touch the side of the fireplace. Okay, all that's left is making the materials, and then I would probably do a little firebox in the back. Make a little group here. Push-pull this back, maybe 2 feet. And then this takes us way back to when we first did like chamfering walls in assignment 2 of the first class. So I'm just grabbing a line and I'm moving it maybe 4 inches, just so that it has a little bit of a slant on the inside. And then I would do the same thing with this line. No, actually I would leave that line as is. Move around here, select that face and delete it, and select the bottom pieces and delete it too. So now I've got a little inner firebox as well that I can start adding materials to. Okay, so to reiterate, if you want to follow along and do that, by all means, that's great. If you want to bring your own fireplace in, that's great. If you want to bring a component in and just replace it because you don't want to get into all that detail, that's totally fine. I just think that what I want you to do for this assignment on this wall is to take that fireplace away, attempt cutting this base in half using intersect selected, and then put a new fireplace of your own in place.